Good afternoon. I can't tell you what a privilege it is to work with my good friend Scott Peterson. He is an awesome managing director, and the vision and energy that you find behind the Rollins Center is in large measure due to successful entrepreneurs like Brother Peterson who have come back to BYU to give back. We have all kinds of people who are willing to give back. So I'm very grateful to them. All right, let's see. I need to open this folder and get my PowerPoint going here. Okay, what I want to talk today about is tech entrepreneurship. And let me start with a little bit of my background. We'll talk about what technology entrepreneurship is, some things that you might need to know, and we'll focus primarily on three major principles, three foundational principles that I think you'll see throughout the semester as you see startups that are in the tech space. So Metcalfe's Law, Disruptive Technology, and Moore's Law. And we'll talk about where we go from here. So a little bit about me. My entree to computers was in 1979. My dad brought home a Heathkit. It was a big box of parts. And we had to assemble this computer. And it was pretty cool. On the inside, it looked something like this. You didn't just go back in the day and order something from Amazon or from Dell and have it shipped to you. You had to put these things together. And there were lots of little tiny parts that you had to put together. It didn't come all in one big integrated circuit that you could just slap into the computer and you were done. So it was quite the involved project. But I discovered something really interesting after this was done. We had to program this and do something with it once we'd put this expensive machine together. Now, I don't know about you, but I have a lot of younger brothers and sisters. I have 9 younger brothers and sisters, actually. One older brother as well, so you can do the math on that one. My mom was busy. So how many of you have younger brothers and sisters? Do they do everything you tell them to do? Generally speaking, no. They tend to be kind of contrarian and do the opposite of what you tell them to do at times. Well, that was my experience too. So imagine my surprise when we put this thing together and it did everything I told it to do. It did everything exactly the way I told. I mean, it was like the sons of Helaman, obeyed every command, every word of command with exactness. And that was just a delight to me. I was captured immediately. It just spoke to me. And I knew I was going to be a computer scientist as soon as I started playing with this Heathkit. Well, and so now my daughter tells me that nerd is a better word than geek, but in my generation, geek is a better word than nerd. How many think that nerd is a bad thing? Come on, be honest. Is it bad to be a nerd? How about geek? Is it bad to be a geek? Yeah, a few more hands. Okay. Maybe I have to change my terminology then. Anyway, I tend to be a geeky kind of a guy. And I tend to be really into computers. So if I start waxing eloquent about technology, forgive me. I did a bachelor's degree and then a PhD in computer science. I love developing for Android and iOS devices. There's my current phone, a Samsung Galaxy Nexus. Every year, I'm developing tens of thousands of lines of code. And I often say that there's little in life that I like more than a good coding frenzy. So that's the kind of geek I am. Okay, so enough about me. Let's talk about entrepreneurship. And let's look at the meaning of the word entrepreneur. So in French, entrepreneur, if you look at the parts of it, it literally means undertaker. Now we see the word undertaker and we have images of dead people, but it means undertaking something. One who undertakes an enterprise, one who owns and manages a business. So an entrepreneur is the person who is at risk of profit or loss. So a person who takes the risk of profit or loss, according to the Oxford English Dictionary. I like that definition. Entrepreneurs don't just sit back and play it safe. They often are the ones swinging for the fences, and they are taking risks. That doesn't mean they're not careful, but they understand that risk is just a part of life, and they take risk. Now, specifically tech entrepreneurship, my definition of this is that a tech entrepreneur is one who's involved in the creation, cultivation and management of ventures whose core products are based on information technology. So tech startups tend to be what we call scalable. A scalable startup can grow rapidly. A scalable startup so 5 people sitting in a back office somewhere or in a garage somewhere can create some product that all of a sudden goes out to millions or billions of users. That's what we mean by scalable. You can reach a lot of people quickly. Whereas if what you're doing is selling hot dogs, there's nothing wrong with selling hot dogs, but how many hot dogs can you physically serve up in a day? What would it take to scale that kind of a business? So you have to have multiple outlets, you have to have multiple employees, you have to figure out your sourcing, and you've got to get enough hot dog material in, and you've got to figure out how to get more people serving those. And so while you can scale a hot dog business, look at Der Wiener Schnitzel. Imagine the shock of a German person for the first time coming to America, thinking, oh, finally I get Wiener Schnitzel. And they go to Der Wiener Schnitzel and they see hot dogs. Anyway, sorry, tangent. But you can scale a hot dog business if you want, but it takes a lot more work than scaling a technology business. I don't know if you remember before Google. Does anybody remember life before Google? Okay, a few hands. What was the search engine before Google? I'm here in Alta Vista in some corners. Yeah, I think Alta Vista was sort of viewed as kind of the best one, and then Google came to town. It did not take long for Google to scale. Now, today they are a massive company, but they scaled very quickly with just a couple of guys. It was Larry and Sergey, and they got to a pretty good scale really, really fast. That's what happens with tech entrepreneurship. You can change the world because your influence expands so rapidly. Now, Scott talked a little bit about why we have a Rollins Center. We want to support you as students in starting your own companies. And we realized a number of years ago that our world is becoming increasingly networked and digitized. How many of you are online right now? Come on, admit it. You're online right now. Okay. We have access through so many devices. My wife can be driving down the freeway. We're doing 75 miles an hour where that's legal. And I can be on the internet doing my work in a car in the middle of Utah. That's pretty amazing given where we were just 10 years ago. Our world is increasingly networked and digitized. How many of you own a VCR? Or know what a VCR is? Okay, only a few hands. How many of you own a DVD player? How many of you have access to online video streaming? Okay, you see most hands on that last question, right? Increasingly, things are getting digitized. We're turning our atoms into bits. Where before I'd go down to the store and buy a tape, a VCR tape, or VHS tape, that's what it was. Can't even remember the terminology. I'd go buy a VHS tape or I'd buy a DVD. Now I can just go sign up and I can just have that delivered over my Google Fiber connection. Anybody here have Google Fiber already? Oh yeah, I'm jealous. I live in Orem. Enough said. I should move. But anyway, okay. The implications of this are really profound. It really is changing the way we interact and the way we think and the way we live. And we want you to be the ones who are the extraordinary entrepreneurs changing the world. That's really our vision. So we want to do everything we can to help you to accomplish that. Now, I've been involved in startups since high school. Had some friends, we did some coding for hire, that kind of stuff. In college, I was involved with startups also. I got back from my mission and worked with my high school friend that I referenced under the first bullet point there. And we were doing some really cool stuff. And I realized, hey, you know what? I need some more CS education to do this really cool stuff. And so I went and got my PhD and kind of got pulled into the orbit of the Marriott School there. And I've been involved in a number of startups. Some of the names are listed here. I really enjoy doing that sort of thing. Most of all, I enjoy creating. And I just feel satisfaction when I create something and I see that, well, number one, that the computer's obeying me. and number two, that it does something useful, and that number three, that other people can do something useful with that too. I watch the ratings on my iOS app very carefully because I love, and maybe it's just my ego, and it's already big enough, I love seeing the positive feedback when users say, oh, I love this. This is great. Thank you. I get emails all the time about, oh, what a great thing that citation index is. And that's enough motivation for me to keep on doing it. Okay, so what knowledge does an entrepreneur need? This is my observation of the kinds of things that an entrepreneur needs to know. And it's really a long list. You need to figure out, how do I find out whether an idea is an opportunity that's worth pursuing? Ideas really are a dime a dozen. And it's not the idea that matters as much as it is the team around it. And do you have the resources to be successful at that idea? Can you do a better job than the competitors out there? And this workshop actually tonight at 5 o'clock will talk about some of these questions. That's an important topic for an entrepreneur. How do I figure out whether that idea is an opportunity I should pursue? By the way, I do think every entrepreneur ought to have an idea book. And you ought to write down stuff you're thinking about. And then, just like a scripture study journal, you ought to keep it close to you, and when you have an idea, go write some things down about it. And if you keep returning to the same idea over and over again, that's maybe an indication that you ought to spend some more time on it. And maybe that's one indicator that perhaps it's an opportunity worth pursuing, if you have the passion for it. If you don't have the passion for it, you're not going to be successful at it. And that may sound cliche, but you'll hear that from a lot of people. You got to do what you have passion for. Other startup skills you're going to need. How do I create a company? How do I manage employees? How do I find the money to pull all of this off? What about sales management and sales techniques? You need to know a lot about how to sell, because money is the lifeblood of your company. And if your money runs out, you're done. You can't continue if there's not, I mean, it's just like a body. Blood, when your blood's gone, you're dead. Same with a company and money. How do you bootstrap versus raising outside funds from angels or venture capitalists? How do you build teams and then execute on your vision? That is a key skill. How many of you have an idea but you don't know, well, this is a rhetorical question, so don't raise your hand. How many of you have an idea but you don't know how to assemble the team to pull off the execution of that idea? That happens all the time. So where do I find the right skills in people and motivate them to come be a part of my organization? And then there's a lot more stuff. You got to figure out branding and marketing and how do you scale your company and tons of stuff. And so we have some programs here at the Marriott School that will help you. How many are in the business minor right now? Okay, so here's one program where you'll get some exposure to some of these ideas. And you might be in all kinds of majors, and I think that the business management minor will help you to be a better business person and to manage those companies going forward. There's an actual entrepreneurship emphasis within the business management major that you can enroll in, and will teach you a lot of those skills that I talked about on the previous slide. If you're more of a tech person like I am, we have an information systems major that I teach in, and a good number of our students are entrepreneurial. And so, but they want to do a really deep dive into the technology so that they know that component well. And we have a number of graduate programs in the MBA and elsewhere that will help with entrepreneurship skills too. There are other resources like our center. There's another center down on the 3rd floor, the Economic Self-Reliance Center, the Ballard Center. They do social entrepreneurship and other things, but if you want to do some kind of a social entrepreneurship thing, they would be the center that you'd go to. And we have a global management center as well. We have a lot of clubs. Oh, it's no longer CEO. I need to change this. It's the Entrepreneurship Club. And there's an Association for Information Systems Club and lots of other things that you can get involved in. We give away, I should change that from tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars. We give away money in the Miller New Venture Challenge, in the business model competition. We're running a mobile app competition. The finals will be in March, and we'll see several dozen. Well, maybe we won't see. We'll we'll see maybe a dozen finalists, but there are several dozen teams participating in the mobile app competition, and we'll filter that down to the final few and award money to them. Very cool stuff that you guys as students are doing, and we want to incentivize you to do something beyond just the classroom experience. If you're just sitting here in class doing homework and reading books, that'll only take you so far. Entrepreneurship is about doing. So the role of mentors is really, really vital in a startup. You cannot succeed at a startup without having role models and people you go talk to. And so one of the things we do at the Rollins Center is we spend a lot of resources. We've actually hired a director of mentoring. We spend a lot of resources in helping match up students with mentors who can answer those questions. So I'd invite you to go to getmentoring.com or to stop by 470 in the Tanner building here to talk to us about getting some mentoring too. And then there are a lot of things you can read. We've assigned Nail It Then Scale It for this class, correct, Seth?
We actually just have them read a summary now.
Oh, just a summary now.
You can still read the book.
Okay. But a highly recommended book, Nail It Then Scale It. A lot of other good ones. These will be in the slides. We have a library downstairs you can use. Oh, and there's more. You need to stay current with trends. If you're going to be in tech, you got to know what's going on. I mean, what's the deal with Facebook and mobile advertising? You know, where are things going with the cloud? What does all that mean? And you either need to be a geek or have a good one who's a partner for you. Anyway, let's go to the three major principles that I want to address. Network effect, disruptive innovation, and Moore's law, exponential technology growth. If you understand these three, you have a good idea of the forces that are operating on our world of tech entrepreneurship. Okay, network effect. This occurs when a product becomes more valuable as more people use it. So an example is, say, a telephone network. So rewind the clock back to when telephones were first invented. How valuable is the first telephone? If I'm the first guy to buy a telephone, what value do I have here? Who can I call if there's only one telephone in the world? Yeah, nobody. Basically, I've got bragging rights. That's all I've got. I can say, hey, look, I got this telephone. How cool is that? And I can show all my friends. But what really happens is we build a telephone network that it's easy to connect to. And so now, as more people connect to that network, now all of a sudden, because somebody else is consuming the same resource I'm consuming, they're buying telephones, my telephone all of a sudden gets more valuable because I can call more people. We kind of saw this with Microsoft Windows. Back in the day, it was the first operating system on a personal computer that kind of really took root. And what happened was developers said, oh, Microsoft's taking care of us. We're going to go with Microsoft and develop stuff for them. And users kind of said, you know what? All of the developers are on the Microsoft Windows platform, so I think I'm going to buy Windows. And very soon we had the cycle of users saying, the developers that are there, developers saying, hey, you know what, look at all these users, look at how big this market is, bigger than the others, and it became a winner-takes-all effect. Here's what happens. Robert Metcalfe, who founded 3Com and was inventor of the Ethernet protocol that the internet runs on, he observed this effect happening in networks. He said, okay, the value of a network, I see that it increases in proportion to the square of the number of users. So if I have 2 users, that's worth 4. If I have 3 users, that's worth 9. If I have 4 users, 16. It's growing exponentially. So, and what typically happens is it takes a lot of money to build that network in the first place. If I'm building a telephone network, I've got to go dig trenches, lay cable, do whatever things I need to do to build that up. And then I've spent all this money, but now it's easy for people to connect in. The incremental cost to add one more user is really tiny. So I, as a user, don't have to invest $1 million in buying into that network. I invest $100 or $200, and or whatever the amount is, or $20 a month. And so it's very easy for me to join this network that has that a lot of money has gone into. So when I have competing technologies and there's a network effect, we're going to get a winner takes all situation because of this feedback on the comparative utility of the various products in the market. For example, iPhone, okay, we had Blackberries and we had Trio devices. Anybody ever own a Palm Trio? I did. I loved it. Anybody own a BlackBerry ever? A few more hands on that one? Okay. Why did iPhone take over? Well, it combined touch. I mean, it had this unique value proposition of not only can it be that Palm device, but it can also be your phone, and it can be this really cool gaming platform, and it's, you know, we're going to build on the iPod success, all kinds of things like that. But what happens is nowadays, when you're making a decision, users like iPhone because it's really cool, number one, they've built a brand, but also there are lots of apps. How many advertisements have you seen where they've said, okay, we just crossed this number of apps for the iPhone? And Android was always way behind that. On the other hand, developers like to write software for the iPhone because there are a lot of users there. And so we get a feedback cycle, and there's a winner. Now, how many of you own an Android phone at this point? How many Android phones out there? Okay, so 30% of the class maybe. How many own an iPhone? Wow, look at that. So it wasn't 30%, it was more like 20% own Androids. Or maybe some, how many own both? Oh, okay, no, we're students still, okay. I own an Android phone and an iPad. That's how I compromise. And sometimes I serve up networking from my Android phone to my iPad, so anyway. I love all technology. Remember Napoleon Dynamite? Remember Kip at the end where he's singing to LaFonda? About how he loves her. Yes, I love you, but still I love technology, always and forever. Yeah. Only subtract the nerdy part of Kip. Okay, or maybe not, I don't know. Okay, so you clearly have bought into the iPhone platform as a group. You as a college student group have said, yeah, we love iPhone. How many know which is the more popular platform? Is it iOS or is it Android? Android by far. So if you look at the numbers of devices sold, there are more Android devices. And the reason is because an Android device is cheaper in a developing country than an iPhone is. And so you see a lot more Android devices out there. But I still think of iPhone as the king of touch devices. So anyway, winner takes all, network effect. If you can build into your product a network effect, that's a huge win for you. The second thing that you're looking for, sorry, let me go back to network effect, one more thing. Look at social networking. Who's the winner in social networking right now? Facebook. What about Google+? Oh, you laugh. You mock Google. I heard a laugh. Okay. I don't know if Facebook will be the ultimate winner or if Google Plus is going anywhere, but yeah, Facebook clearly is the winner, but it wasn't the first one to the market. Does anybody remember any of the earlier social networking platforms? Myspace, okay. Why did Facebook win over Myspace? Security, lack of grunge, although I don't know. It used to be exclusive. And that was actually a technique that Zuckerberg used. He said, hey, this is the Harvard Facebook, so come on and join, and it's this kind of club that you're in. Yeah, exactly right. So we see these network effects all the time. As a massive herd, we moved over to Facebook because of this network effect that it exhibited. Okay, so first principle is network effect. Second principle is the principles of disruptive innovations. Now, a disruptive innovation displaces an entrenched technology not because it performs better. It actually performs worse. And yet we buy more of it. Why? It's because the overall value that it provides is better. And so sometimes we'll say, I don't need to buy that expensive, really cool thing. I'm going to go with the Android and get something that's a little bit more cost effective. So with disruptive innovations, what happens is we're altering the basis on which we're competing. Let me just illustrate this with this graph here. Over time, markets demand more performance. In 1906, what features did you expect, or did your great-great-grandfather expect on an automobile? In particular, did he expect to find power locks on the doors? Maybe not even locks on the doors, I don't know. Power windows, certainly not. A number of things like that. But today, we demand a ton more in our cars. And now we're putting economy constraints on our cars as well. Any market has a high end and a low end. And so over time, the high end and low end both grow. So here's what happens with what we call a sustaining technology. A technology is introduced, and it satisfies the market, and over time, the owner of that technology will improve it. So think about cell phones, for example. Do you remember pictures of the first cell phones that came out? Bricks that people were carrying around, and really bad battery life, and really bad audio quality. And now, how's the quality on your cell phone today? Do you like the clarity of the calls that you have? Do you ever have calls drop? Yeah, it still happens. So would you rather have a landline than a cell phone? Because landline calls, they never drop, do they? Or hardly ever. Sorry?
It's all about texting. We don't use
Oh, it's all about texting. Okay, see, it's hard to text on a landline. Yeah, there are actually I've seen services that will turn your text messages into a voicemail for your landline, for the really old people out there. Okay, but so think about cell phones over time. I mean, the technology has grown dramatically, really dramatically. And today's cell phone is totally different than 10 years ago's cell phone. In fact, even the cell phones from 5 years ago, we kind of giggle at. Okay, well, that's what happens with a sustaining technology. It grows over time. Now, along comes a disruptive innovation. Somebody comes up with a new idea. You know what? I'm going to do portable, black and white, solar-powered televisions that are really tiny. And they come into the market, and what happens is people look at them and they say, man, that is a lousy performing technology. I wouldn't buy a solar-powered, black and white, tiny television. I want a big guy with 1080p or 4K or whatever the latest technology happens to be. I want a big flat screen with all the beautiful high-def stuff I can have. We mock that little product there. But over time, it progresses. It evolves just the same way that the sustaining technology is evolving. It gets better over time. Now, look at the graph right here. When this disruptive technology goes from mocking it territory up to where it crosses over into the low end of what the market wants. Where's the sustaining technology? It's way above what the high end demands. Yes?
But if you have something that's terrible of a product, how do they have the funds to improve it over time? Wouldn't they just
Yeah. How do you develop this technology if it's so bad? What happens is you don't go to the mainstream market. You go to an unserved market, and you don't compete in the mainstream market. You go to, maybe in Mongolia, there's a need for solar-powered televisions, and they don't care if it's black and white or color. And so I start developing it there, build up a client base in that underserved or unserved market. That's a great question. That's how it happens. And so over time, though, it progresses. And now all of a sudden we've got this portable TV. Maybe it's become color or something like that, and I'm using organic LED displays and whatever other cool tech. Or maybe that's too much for the low end of the market. I don't know. But look at the sustaining technology. It's way above what the high end of the market is asking for. How did it get there? They were listening to their customers. And their customers said, I want this feature and that feature and the other feature. And they keep making their product better. And it becomes better and better. But as that happens, often it becomes more expensive. And so at this point, when I'm making a decision and I say, okay, here's the value. I can spend just this much on a low-end type product, or I can spend money on the Cadillac thing. So how much is that Android phone going to cost you? How much is that iPhone going to cost you? Now, you can buy Androids that are as nice and as expensive as iPhones, But you can also buy Androids that are really cheap and easy to get. So that's the kind of thing that happens. All of a sudden, that technology enters the low end of the zone there, and the market looks at that and says, oh, okay, I'll respect that. That's a value, and maybe I'll buy some of that. Okay, so network effect. You get a winner-takes-all situation when it costs a lot to build the network, but only a little bit to add somebody, and then you get the whole market moving in to participate in that network. Disruptive innovation, you want to look for ways to develop a technology that provides a better value than all that expensive stuff out there. And number 3, Moore's Law. Now, I don't know how old this graph is. This is from Wikipedia. If you went to Wikipedia today, I think they'd extend this graph a little bit further. I should probably update this slide, but Gordon Moore, in the year that I was born, observed that, he was the co-founder of Intel, by the way, he observed that every 24 months, the number of transistors we could put on an integrated circuit would double. Now, does anybody know what you do with transistors? How do transistors help you in an integrated circuit? Well, a transistor can represent a 0 or a 1. A transistor can be a unit of computation. And so the more transistors you can put on your chips, the more information you can have there, and the more calculations you can perform. And if you get doubling, well, that's actually what's happened to Intel processors over this time span. That dashed line is a log linear plot. So up here is 1 billion, and down here is 100 million, and 10 million, and 1 million. So we're going up by powers of 10 on each of these units here. So it's log linear that every 24 months we see doubling. And that's been true my entire life. Doubling of the number of transistors every 2 years. Now, what happens when you double? There's a story I like to tell about the Emperor of China, who loved the game of chess when he was introduced to it. And he said, okay, this cool new game, I'm going to reward the inventor of chess with whatever he wants. So he brought him in and he said, what do you want? And the guy thought and he said, I'll take 1 grain of rice. What? 1 grain of rice? Well, 1 grain of rice for the first square on the chessboard. 2 grains of rice for the second square. 4 grains for the third square, and so on until we cover the board. So the Emperor of China thinks, I'm getting off easy. How many grains of rice would it take to fulfill that formula? If you double every generation, so that first row, you're going to get 8 doubling, or 7 doublings. So basically that's 2 to the 8th grains of rice, which is 256. Now on the second row, you're going to go 2 to the 16th, which is basically 65,000. Okay, after you go halfway through the chessboard, that's 2 to the 32nd, and you're talking about 4 billion grains of rice. Okay, how much rice is 4 billion grains of rice? That's a lot of rice. I don't think I could eat that much. And by the time you get to the end of the chessboard, you're talking 2 to the 64th power. Any idea how big that is? Well, it's 4 billion times 4 billion, roughly. But, I mean, that's more rice than we can possibly grow. That's a lot of rice. Okay, so that's what Moore's Law illustrates. When we double things every 24 months, just the power is enormous. So you think about the computation power that exists in our cell phones today. How many operations per second are happening on these devices? Any idea? It's more than 1 billion operations that it does every second. 1 billion things. How long does it take you to do 1 billion things? Okay, anyway, so these are tremendously powerful devices, and we expect that they will continue to get tremendously more powerful. So what that says for a technology person is that if I don't have enough power today to do what my vision says I want to do with the technology, maybe in 2 years or 4 years, I will have that power. We live in this vastly expanding world of capability. We have increasing computational power. We can store more information than we ever could before. How many of you have a 1 terabyte hard drive on your laptop? Anybody have How much storage does somebody have here? What's the maximum storage somebody has here? Anybody have a 4 terabyte storage system, disk storage system? 2 terabytes? Okay, 2 terabytes. When I first started with computing, well, we didn't have a hard drive on that Heath kit. We had a cassette recorder. So we'd play our little cassette tape, and it would feed little bits of data at whatever slow speed it fed. And then we had floppy disks. The first hard drives I saw, I was about 16 years old, and they were 5 megabyte hard drives. And now you laugh at 5 megabytes, and you think, well, that's nothing. That's one image. That's less than a photo on my high-res camera. But today, you can buy something that I couldn't imagine when I was a kid. Today, you can buy storage. You can carry around on a thumb drive. Okay, right there. If I told you that was 500 megabytes, you'd say, man, that's tiny. 2 gigabytes might be a typical expected size for a thumb drive, or 8 gigabytes might be what you expect for a thumb drive. So increasing storage capability, because we're putting more of these little transistors close together on these chips. Increasing bandwidth. I'm jealous of you Google Fiber customers. Fiber to the home, I mean, that's incredible. What can you do with a gigabit? You and all of your buddies can stream 4 different high-def movies at the same time pretty easily, or maybe even 8. This is all happening at a decreasing cost per unit. And you get increasing connectivity, as I mentioned earlier. I can be on the freeway doing internet stuff. So these trends are all converging, and we get this wonderful cycle of I increase the speed and capacity, and I lower the cost of my devices. I can process information faster as a result of that. So I rethink my operating procedures, and I innovate. And I say, hey, you know, what if I formed a company that did social networking? Well, he didn't call it social networking, but anyway, I rethink how I do things. I develop new goods and services. I get hopefully a network effect that increases demand for my IT, my information technology. So I say, well, I'm going to spend more money developing this stuff, and that leads to this cycle that we've been in for as long as I've been alive. Now, let's see, we're almost at the end, so I'm going to have to wrap up. Technology has been changing rapidly for years, and now business is starting to change just as rapidly as the technology. And so I think it's important for us as the millennial I say us, but I mean you. I look in the mirror and I see I'm no longer that young. I think you need the ability to understand what are the competitive drivers of your company. I don't think it's enough to say, I'm going to go be an employee and do what my boss tells me. Yeah, you need to do what your boss asks of you, but you need to be looking for how do you add value to the company. And if you're somebody who's looking for how you add value, and that's what an entrepreneur does. An entrepreneur looks for new ideas, new ways to create things that add value, that make you more competitive. That's what's going to make you valuable to that employer, and they're going to want to keep you around and promote you and do all of those things. And for those who think I'm just going to be a tech guru, I don't think that's good enough. I think you need to understand the business side as well as the technology side. And every one of us has to retool over and over again. I teach a course in iOS development in the fall, IS 543, if anybody has the prerequisites to do iPhone programming. And I have to retool every semester for that, because Apple is continually changing iOS and introducing a new look and feel or whatever else. And so that's what I think we need to do in today's environment. Retool over and over again. Okay. I will be around for some Q&A, and I'll be introducing most of the guests this semester. So we'll have plenty of opportunities to interact over the course of the semester. Thank you for your patience, and those who want to come up front, we'll do some goodies and do a little Q&A. Have a good week.